Hi, my name is Mike Miller, and my placement this year is SOWK School District. I'm a working school social worker, working with her, and I've been really focused on the homeless students this year, and I've also been interning at the local food bank. And that I've been dealing with so many families struggling with being able to afford housing. So it was something that I was sort of forced into learning a lot about from the beginning, and I've kind of grown passionate towards it. So I wanted to learn more about it, and I was hoping maybe I could teach some people something about it as well. So I didn't know how else to do this, but I'm just going to videotape my computer and you'll hear my audio over top. Okay, so trauma-informed care, homelessness among youth. So a brief overview, I'm going to talk about the impact homelessness has, the trauma related to homelessness among youth, impact within my personal agency, the SOWK School District, history of services for homelessness, review of literature, and then best practice approach. So, the general definition of homelessness, the problem with this is I could have spent 25 minutes just talking about that, the definition of homelessness under the McKinney-Vento Act. But I obviously don't have that, I only have 15 minutes, so I just gave a general definition, individuals who lack a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence. If you want a more detailed definition, in the sense of like how do you categorize unaccompanied, all that stuff, I do have this link and I'll post that on our discussion board as well. According to the Institute for Children, Poverty, and Homelessness, living in homelessness has been linked to high rates of mental health and behavior problems in young children. And I'm really going to expand on that throughout this whole presentation. National estimates have found that 1.3 to 1.7 million youth experience homelessness a year. The number of accompanied homelessness youth counted by the U.S. Department of Education. Now, this one I want to talk about for a little bit because the number one indicator at SOWK School District of students who drop out is being labeled unaccompanied. An unaccompanied homelessness student is the number one predictor. So when I saw these numbers, it was a little bit upsetting. You can see in 2010-11, it's 55,000 that accounted for. And then in 2013-14, we're talking nearly 90,000. So there's been a rise. So, Catton et al. Studied 377 homeless adults. And the reason why I wanted to just quickly talk about an adult is because I want to know how does this affect, just very briefly, after high school, or after middle school, when I'm seeing all these students. I want to know if we don't help them, what kind of consequences does that have? So, of these homeless adult participants, 91% were singles, separated, or divorced. 36% had not completed high school. 85% were unemployed. 24% scored lowest on an index of family dysfunction. 53% had been diagnosed with a substance abuse disorder. 58% had a history of arrest. Homeless children as a group perform academically below their housed peers in poverty. So I mention that because we often hear about all the negative correlations or the unfortunate correlations that we hear with people who are in poverty, whether it's academics, all these things. Well, homelessness has to deal with poverty, but then also the instability, the unstable matter of whether or not they have a house. So it probably a real focus if you're worrying about poverty and academic results. I'm sure those dealing with homelessness are suffering just as much, if not more. So this is SOWK School District. This is the numbers that I could come together over the past about 10 years. And as you can see, there has been a rise. Now, there's been a little bit of a dip, but I will tell you, as of the 2017-18 year, we don't have all the numbers, of course, yet, but it's going to go back up. It's been a pretty rough year when it comes to homeless students. So if you go back 5 years, it was kind of a flat line, comparative to this, very low amount, but things have gotten worse. History of services. In 1983, the first federal task force on homelessness was created. However, this task force did not address homelessness through pragmatic or policy actions. In 1986, the Homeless Persons Survival Act was introduced in both houses of Congress. The act contained emergency relief measures, preventative measures, and long-term solutions to homelessness. This was a pretty big year for homelessness because you also had the Homeless Eligibility Clarification Act and the Homeless Housing Act was adopted. In 1987, Congress passed legislation we know of today as McKenty-Vento Homeless Assistance Act, and that's something the majority of school districts use as a base to go about dealing with a student that is homeless. I know that's what SOWK uses as well. A study of 137 homeless and runaway female adolescents indicated that sexual abuse prior to running away as well as physical victimization was positively correlated with homelessness youth. So we're talking about a positive correlation of trauma. 43% have experienced physical abuse in the home, and 21 to 60% report sexual abuse. And that's not just female, that's females and males. So there is a strong predictor that trauma is going to be tied to being homeless as a youth. So I wanted to mention host home programs because we were talking about how to deal with homelessness among youth, and you just go, hey, why don't we just find housing for them? But unfortunately, I have to deal with telling people consistently that I don't necessarily have a solution for that because we don't have the resources for that. So I was looking and I stumbled upon host home programs, which I really liked. And that's a new program, a newish program. You can find about 4 or 5 of them online that are really doing some good work, and it's done through collaboration of local youth serving agencies and community volunteers. So community volunteers are recruited, screened, and trained to provide short-term supportive housing and food for homeless youth. The youth receive ongoing case management as well. And I think this could be really the future. If we can get this in all communities, that would be ideal. I don't know what kind of resources it takes. Obviously, I don't have this in my community, but I think this could be a very valuable thing. So review of literature. Cohen, Deblinger, and Manarino found that focused cognitive behavior therapy on trauma issues among children with PTSD leads to greater improvement in several problem areas as compared to an intervention without focus. So when using cognitive behavior therapy, which we know is a trauma-informed care practice, if you really focus what specifically the symptom that you or the trauma that you want to progress on, that's when you see the best results. Positive behavioral interventions and supports. This is a really good one as I work in schools, and it's something that is typically used in schools. It's a preventative model approach that lends itself to whole school or school-wide implementations, typically using behavior modification techniques. Studies show that PBIS is implemented school-wide. When it is effective in improving school climate and student academic performance. Child-parent psychotherapy. Keeshan et al. Found that when using child-parent psychotherapy, mothers recently placed in a shelter demonstrated increased capacity for using positive comments and improved abilities to implement parental skills taught. Applications of harm reduction principles. I wasn't very familiar with harm reduction principles, but it was similar to trauma-informed care. Applying harm reduction principles in healthcare settings has been found to improve clinical care outcomes. Harm reduction can be a universal precaution applied to all clients, just like trauma-informed care. The principles are humanism, pragmatism, individualism, autonomy, incrementalism, accountability without termination. So family systems theories. This is the one that was my preferred, the pick of choice, because when you're dealing with homeless students, it's most likely not because of specifically them. It's most likely there's issues throughout the family, as we can all assume. So family systems theories can be first found formally developed in the early 1940s. I believe it was for marriage counseling, but don't hold me to that. Famously introduced by Dr. Murray Brown, suggesting that a family is an emotional unit. Patterns of behaviors and beliefs within a family will lead to dysfunction or a functional balance for the family unit as well as the individual. So essentially, the patterns of behaviors, if they're problem behaviors, then you're going to see an imbalance. You're going to see dysfunction within the family and within each individual. If the behaviors are functional, then you're going to see a balance overall within the individual and the family. I hope I explained that well. It's pretty simple in my mind, but I don't know that I explained it that way. So here's some literature for family therapy. Multidimensional family therapy. It has been found to improve parenting skills and reduce teen problematic symptoms. Relational family therapy assumes childhood trauma deeply marks an individual, impacting their every behavior. So relational family therapy has been found to decrease traumatic symptoms and increase likelihood of functional living for people with trauma. Systemic family therapy. Katrina Richardson found that the most effective way to treat school refusal with younger children is through systemic family therapy. She, I believe, went through the majority of forms of family therapy, and she felt that systemic family therapy really helped get kids motivated to get into school. Internal family systems therapy found to decrease symptoms of depression for college students diagnosed with a depression disorder. Okay, so family systems-based therapy. I wanted you to see an actual study where they really applied family therapy and see what kind of results they got out of it. So in this study, it was a pretty large study, it had 400 participants, and they were all homeless youth. And there were two goals established, and that is they wanted to alter dysfunctional family patterns that contribute to homelessness, as we talked about before, that the patterns need to be functional in order to see good results. And problem behaviors, and have youth and parents feel more confident in their ability to communicate needs and expectations. Clinician was required to provide a non-hostile, non-confrontational, non-judgmental tone, and that's something you'll see in TIC principles. Cognitive behavioral techniques were utilized to interrupt problem behavior patterns, followed by new skills being taught and directions to practice and apply those skills outside of therapy. 16 sessions were offered, 60 minutes each, and the majority of sessions time was spent focusing on communication skills, problem solving, reducing negative attitudes, and increasing positive attributions and expectations among family members, which that last portion you would see in cognitive behavior therapy. So the measures used. 3 domains measured through a clinician-assisted self-report questionnaire: family functioning, substance use, and individual problem behaviors. The conflict tactic scale was used, the family environment scale, the parental bonding instrument, the National Youth Survey delinquency scale, and youth self-report. So here were the results. Conflict scores were significantly higher among children that experienced abuse, and that negatively affected the treatment outcome. So basically that means it's an indicator that if a child did experience abuse within the family, that you do have to adjust now. It's not a universal system where you just do the same thing for every single family. Now you have to adapt. Intervention was equally effective on improving family and individual outcomes for those non-abused compared to participants abused. So the intervention did work regardless if they were abused or not, probably because family therapy allows you to tailor towards symptoms. Improvement in individual functioning appeared to be related to family interaction patterns targeted by interventions. The presence of positivity rather than the lack of negativity predicted greater relationship satisfaction. So, in summary, the national estimate have found that 1.3 to 1.7 million youth experience homelessness a year. Number one predictor for students dropping out of SOWK School District is being an unaccompanied minor. Sexual and physical abuse is significantly correlated with youth experiencing homelessness. Many evidence-based interventions such as PBIS and child-parent psychotherapy have been found to improve individual behavior and family functioning. Family therapy provides effective treatment for individuals and families regardless of specific problems within the family and whether or not abuse occurred. And here are my references, and I'm going to post this on the discussion board. If anybody has any questions, feel free to ask me on the discussion board. I know some of this stuff was very small and you can't really tell, but I just want to thank everybody for listening, and I wish you all good luck and Merry Christmas.